The training room was cold, metallic, and silent, except for the low hum of machines and the occasional hiss of air. The alien soldiers stood around, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Today was the day they would see if the human trainee, Marcus, could live up to his reputation. They had heard of his survival stories on Earth, of how he fought against impossible odds. But none of them believed that a human, especially one so young, could survive what they had in store. The alien trainers, strong and seasoned, were known for their brutal tests, designed to break even the toughest of warriors. They had watched countless soldiers fall under the pressure of their challenges, but today Marcus would face something no one else had ever endured. The first test was simple: gravity. It was a standard test used to measure endurance and strength. But to the aliens, gravity was a tool of punishment, a force that could crush even the strongest beings. The room began to shift, the floor beneath Marcus' feet starting to vibrate. The gravity generators hummed louder, and the pressure began to build. Marcus stood tall, staring straight ahead, his eyes focused and determined. The alien trainers exchanged glances. They had already cranked the gravity to levels far beyond what any human could endure. It was set at 5 times the normal gravity of Earth. "Are you ready, human?" one of the alien trainers asked, his voice cold and calculating. He had seen countless species crumble under pressure, and he expected the same from Marcus. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He took a deep breath, his muscles tightening, feeling the weight of the gravity press down on him. He could feel his body straining, his legs trembling slightly, but he didn't move. His mind was clear. He had been through worse before. Earth had taught him how to survive, how to endure, and how to fight back when all seemed lost. The gravity continued to increase. Now, it was 10 times the gravity of Earth. Marcus' legs buckled slightly, but he steadied himself, pushing back against the crushing force. Sweat began to pour from his forehead, but he didn't flinch. He gritted his teeth and stood firm. The aliens watched, their expressions unreadable. Some of them were impressed, but others were growing annoyed. They had expected this to be over by now. No human could last under this kind of pressure. They were about to increase the gravity even further when Marcus spoke. "Is this all you've got?" His voice was steady, almost mocking. The aliens were stunned. They hadn't expected him to speak, let alone challenge them. The trainer in charge of the test scowled. He gestured to his colleagues. "Increase it 10 times more." The gravity intensified. Marcus' knees buckled under the force, and he groaned as he struggled to maintain his balance. But still, he didn't fall. The aliens began to murmur amongst themselves. This was beyond their expectations. They were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this human was different. But they didn't want to give up so easily. One of the alien soldiers, a massive figure with thick armored plating, stepped forward. "You're going to break, human. You can't withstand this forever." Marcus looked up at the alien, a fire burning in his eyes. "Watch me," he said simply. The pressure was nearly unbearable now. His body felt as if it was being crushed from all sides. But Marcus held on. He could feel the pain building in his chest, his legs burning, his muscles screaming for relief, but he refused to give in. The aliens were beginning to take notice. The looks on their faces shifted from curiosity to something else: respect. But the test was not over. The alien leader gave a signal, and the gravity increased once again. This time, it was set to 30 times the gravity of Earth. Marcus' body screamed in pain as the weight of the world pressed down on him, but he didn't collapse. The aliens were starting to feel uncomfortable. They had never seen anything like this before. Even their strongest warriors had failed at this point. And yet, Marcus stood. He was shaking, his body trembling under the immense pressure, but he was still standing. His eyes were locked on the aliens, defiant and unbroken. Another alien trainer stepped forward, this one taller and more intimidating than the others. "You're strong, human, but you're not invincible. This will crush you." No one can survive this. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't speak, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His body was on the edge of collapse, but he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing him fail. He had survived on Earth by being tougher, faster, and more determined than anyone else, and he wasn't about to let some alien species prove otherwise. The seconds felt like hours. The aliens stood, waiting for him to break, but Marcus held on. Slowly, the gravity began to ease, the pressure lifting from his body. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his chest heaving. His body was bruised, battered, and exhausted, but he hadn't broken. The aliens stood in stunned silence. They had underestimated this human. He had survived their test, something no other species had ever done. Marcus raised his head, his eyes still burning with defiance. "Is that all?" he asked again, his voice weak but filled with challenge. The aliens didn't know how to respond. For the first time, they weren't sure if they had made a mistake by underestimating humanity. The test had begun with the hope of breaking him. But now, they weren't so sure anymore. They looked at each other, uncertain of what to do next. Marcus had passed the test, and in doing so, had shown them all just how dangerous humans could be. They had never expected this. The first test was over, but the message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The second test was even more brutal than the first. After Marcus had survived the crushing gravity, the aliens knew they had to push him even harder. They couldn't allow one human to make a mockery of their training, to show that humans were capable of something they believed was impossible. They would need to break him, to show him the true meaning of alien strength and resilience. The aliens led Marcus into a new chamber, a large open space with walls made of reinforced material. A new challenge awaited him, one that tested his endurance and agility. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The alien trainers, having recovered from their initial shock, prepared to put Marcus through a different kind of test. This time, the focus was on speed and reflexes. It was something they believed no human could survive. A loud beep echoed through the chamber, followed by a deep, rumbling sound. From the walls, mechanical arms shot out, each holding a large weapon, blades, spikes, and energy projectiles, all designed to strike at Marcus from all directions. The floor beneath him began to shift, and a countdown began flashing in front of him. The alien trainer in charge of this test spoke, his voice cold. "Survive this, human, and we will know you are worthy." Marcus barely had time to register the challenge before the weapons began to move. The first attack came at him from his left, a blade swinging down with incredible speed. He barely had time to react, but his instincts kicked in. He dropped to the ground, just avoiding the strike. But the next attack came from above, a spike that shot down toward him. Marcus twisted his body, narrowly avoiding it as it slammed into the ground where he had been only moments ago. His heart raced, sweat dripped down his face, but he kept moving. The chamber was becoming a deadly obstacle course. The walls moved, shifting the layout, making it even harder for Marcus to dodge the weapons. They were faster now, more precise. The alien trainers had underestimated him before, and they were beginning to realize that Marcus was not just surviving, he was adapting. Every time they threw something at him, he adjusted, his reflexes sharp, his mind focused. One of the alien soldiers stepped forward, watching Marcus' movements carefully. "He's faster than we thought," he muttered. The weapons were coming at him from all angles now, spinning blades, glowing energy shots, and fire projectiles. The room was a blur of deadly movements, each strike narrowly missing Marcus as he danced between them. He was already tired, his muscles screaming for rest, but there was no time to stop. His mind kept him going, pushing past the exhaustion. Each time the weapons came near, his body reacted without thinking, a mix of instinct and training. Marcus dove, rolling under one attack while jumping over another. He could feel his heart pounding, the sweat stinging his eyes. But he didn't slow down. The aliens, watching from above, were now seeing something they hadn't expected. This human wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. His speed, his agility, and his sheer willpower were starting to wear them down. The mechanical arms seemed to speed up, and for a moment, it felt like the entire room was closing in on Marcus. The alien trainers pushed the test to its limits, their eyes narrowing as they watched him. They wanted him to fail, wanted him to prove that no human could match their advanced technology and strength. But with each passing second, Marcus was showing them just how wrong they were. A final wave of weapons came at him, a barrage of energy blasts that would have easily taken out any lesser fighter. Marcus, already on the edge, moved with precision, dodging the blasts and leaping over obstacles with an intensity that left the aliens in awe. He rolled across the floor, evading another close blast, before finally coming to a stop. The room fell silent. The weapons halted, their mechanical limbs retracting back into the walls. Marcus, breathing heavily, stood up slowly. His body was bruised, covered in sweat, and his muscles were aching, but he was still on his feet. The alien trainers were stunned. They had expected Marcus to fall, to break under the pressure of their test. Instead, he had stood his ground, barely even showing signs of weakness. One of the trainers, a large alien with shimmering silver scales, approached Marcus slowly. "You're stronger than I thought," the trainer said, his voice filled with a strange mix of admiration and frustration. "But you can't last forever." Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow and looked the alien in the eye. "I'm not finished yet," he replied, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "You haven't seen what I can really do." The trainers exchanged uncertain glances. Marcus had passed the second test, something no other creature, human or alien, had ever managed. The challenge had been brutal, but it had proven one thing: humanity was not to be underestimated. The alien leader stood in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Finally, he spoke. "Prepare for the next test," he ordered. Marcus didn't have time to rest. He had passed 2 of their tests, but the aliens were far from finished with him. And as the doors to the chamber opened, he knew the worst was yet to come. But he wasn't afraid. If anything, he was more determined than ever to show them that humans were not just survivors, they were fighters. And he would prove it, one test at a time. The third test was unlike any Marcus had faced before. It was not about strength, speed, or agility. This time, the aliens were testing his mind, his ability to survive under pressure, to make quick decisions, and to outthink the deadly environment they had created. They called it the Labyrinth of Shadows. Marcus was led into a massive chamber that was completely dark. The only source of light came from small, glowing panels scattered throughout the room. As the door closed behind him, he felt a cold, creeping sensation in his gut. Something was wrong. He could feel it in the air, the tension, the silence. The room felt alive, like it was waiting for something to happen. "Welcome to the Labyrinth of Shadows, human," the voice of the alien leader echoed through the darkness. "This test will not be about your physical abilities. It will be about your mind, your instincts, and your will to survive." The door slammed shut, and Marcus was plunged into total darkness. He could hear nothing except his own breathing. His heart pounded in his chest, the silence almost suffocating. He stood still for a moment, trying to adjust to the blackness. His eyes struggled to focus, but there was no light to help. He had been trained for tough situations, but this was different. It was mental warfare. Then, without warning, the floor beneath him began to shift. The ground trembled, and Marcus stumbled slightly as the path beneath his feet rearranged itself. He instinctively crouched, his senses alert. His military training had taught him to stay calm in moments like this, but the overwhelming sense of isolation, the sense of being watched, made it harder to focus. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from somewhere in the distance. It was followed by the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. Marcus' instincts flared. He wasn't alone in here. Something was out there. Something dangerous. His pulse quickened as the footsteps grew louder, closer. Whatever was out there had the ability to move silently, and it was closing in on him. A sharp screech cut through the air, followed by a loud thud. Marcus snapped to the side, his body tensing. He heard it, something large, something fast, moving in the darkness. He didn't wait for it to get any closer. Marcus sprinted toward the nearest glowing panel, his mind racing. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he couldn't let whatever was hunting him catch him off guard. The footsteps grew louder, and then a flash of red light illuminated the room for a split second. It was enough. Marcus saw the creature, a monstrous, insect-like alien with sharp mandibles and glowing eyes. It was fast, too fast. It lunged at him, its claws swiping through the air, just missing him by inches. Marcus dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly strike. His heart pounded as he scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The creature hissed, its eyes locked on him. Marcus had no time to think. He needed to survive, and to do that, he had to outthink this predator. The ground beneath him shook again, and the creature lunged once more, but Marcus was ready. He sidestepped, narrowly avoiding its strike, and dashed toward the far corner of the room, where a faint glow illuminated a small doorway. Marcus didn't hesitate. He bolted for it, hearing the creature behind him, its screeches growing more frantic as it chased him. He reached the door, slamming into it with all his weight. The door slid open just as the creature reached him, its claws grazing the edge of his shoulder. Marcus dove through the doorway just in time, his body scraping against the walls. But he didn't stop. He had to keep moving. The door slammed shut behind him, and for a moment, the only sound was his own heavy breathing. He had made it through the first section of the labyrinth, but he knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge was only starting. The alien leader's voice came through the speaker system, cold and emotionless. "You've passed the first part, human, but this is only the beginning. Keep going." Marcus' mind raced as he continued deeper into the labyrinth. The walls seemed to shift and change with every step, creating new paths, new dangers. He could hear the creatures in the distance, more of them, lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Each step he took felt like it was leading him into more peril, but Marcus didn't stop. He was a soldier, a warrior. He had been trained for moments like this, and he wasn't going to let some alien monsters or a dark maze break him. As he continued through the maze, he realized something. The creature he had just escaped wasn't the only danger here. The labyrinth itself was alive, constantly shifting, changing, adapting to his movements. It was a test of survival, but also a test of his ability to think ahead, to anticipate what would come next. His mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. The glowing panels in the room seemed to be marking his path, but they were also triggering traps. More creatures, more obstacles, and perhaps even more dangerous things lurking in the dark. He had to be careful. One wrong move could mean the end. But Marcus wasn't about to give up. He had made it this far, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him now. With every step, he grew more determined, more focused. The creatures, the darkness, the shifting maze, none of it mattered. He had a mission, and that mission was to survive, to show these aliens that humanity was far more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. As the labyrinth twisted and turned, Marcus prepared for whatever came next. His survival instinct kicked in, and he was ready. The test wasn't over yet, but with every challenge, he was proving the aliens wrong. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity was strong, stronger than they could ever know. And Marcus was ready to show them just how dangerous he could be. Marcus continued to move through the labyrinth, his mind sharp and focused. The aliens might have thought they could break him, but every challenge they threw his way only made him stronger. With every obstacle, every test, his resolve hardened. He could hear the creatures in the distance, moving through the darkness, but he wasn't afraid anymore. They were just another part of the game, another hurdle to clear. The next section of the maze was different. The walls were no longer solid stone but seemed to pulse with energy, glowing faintly in the dim light. There was something unsettling about the room, an oppressive feeling in the air, like the very atmosphere was heavy with tension. Marcus didn't trust it. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any signs of danger. He noticed that the glowing panels, once scattered throughout the maze, now lined the walls in neat rows. But something was off. There were more of them now, and they flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then a loud crack echoed through the room, followed by a low rumble. The walls began to shift. Marcus immediately dropped into a crouch, instinctively ready for whatever was coming. He could hear the low, guttural growls of the creatures approaching from all sides. He knew he had no time to waste. The labyrinth was shifting, closing in on him. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. The ceiling began to lower, and Marcus realized the room was shrinking. The walls were moving inward, creating a trap. If he didn't act quickly, he'd be crushed. His pulse raced, but he didn't panic. He'd been in tight spots before. He sprinted toward the nearest glowing panel, using it as a reference point to guide his steps. But as he moved, the ground shifted beneath him. A panel on the floor slid open, and a spiny tentacle shot up, narrowly missing his leg. The creature was fast, its movements too quick for Marcus to react in time. But he wasn't about to let it catch him. With a leap, Marcus launched himself forward, avoiding the tentacle by inches. He didn't waste time looking back. He knew that if he hesitated for even a second, the creature would have him. His heart raced as he sprinted toward the next glowing panel, the walls closing in behind him. The floor beneath him shook again, but this time, Marcus was prepared. As he reached the next panel, the ground beneath him cracked open, revealing a massive pit. He jumped just in time, his hands grabbing the edge of the platform as he pulled himself up. His arms burned with the effort, but he didn't stop. Looking down into the pit, Marcus could see the creatures moving below him, circling like sharks. The dark shadows shifted, their eyes glowing, their claws snapping in the air. They were waiting for him to make a mistake, and he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Marcus quickly scanned the room, searching for a way out. The ceiling continued to lower, and the walls were still moving in. He had only moments left before he'd be trapped, crushed under the weight of the maze. The glowing panels were now more frequent, but they were shifting and disappearing as fast as they appeared. Then he saw it, a narrow passageway, just big enough for him to squeeze through. It was located on the far side of the room, barely visible through the shifting shadows. Without hesitation, Marcus bolted toward it, dodging another tentacle that shot up from the ground. His heart pounded as he sprinted, his every muscle screaming for relief, but he refused to stop. He was so close. Just as the walls were about to close in around him, Marcus dove through the passage, his body sliding into the narrow gap. He heard the walls crash shut behind him, and for a moment, everything went quiet. He was in a new section of the maze, but he had no time to relax. The creatures were still out there, hunting him, and the maze was far from over. His mind raced as he took a deep breath. He was alive. That was all that mattered. But he knew this was only a brief reprieve. The aliens hadn't thrown everything at him yet. There would be more tests, more dangers. But Marcus was ready. He had faced impossible odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. As he continued deeper into the maze, he couldn't help but think about the aliens who had underestimated humanity. They thought they could break him. They thought they could crush his spirit with their traps and their creatures. But what they didn't understand was that humans didn't break. Not easily. Not ever. Marcus was proof of that. The next part of the test awaited him. Whatever it was, he would face it head-on. Because that's what humanity did. We never gave up. And the aliens would soon learn that the hardest thing to kill in the universe was a human's will to survive. Marcus continued to move through the labyrinth, his mind sharp and focused. The aliens might have thought they could break him, but every challenge they threw his way only made him stronger. With every obstacle, every test, his resolve hardened. He could hear the creatures in the distance, moving through the darkness, but he wasn't afraid anymore. They were just another part of the game, another hurdle to clear. The next section of the maze was different. The walls were no longer solid stone but seemed to pulse with energy, glowing faintly in the dim light. There was something unsettling about the room, an oppressive feeling in the air, like the very atmosphere was heavy with tension. Marcus didn't trust it. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any signs of danger. He noticed that the glowing panels, once scattered throughout the maze, now lined the walls in neat rows. But something was off. There were more of them now, and they flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Then, a loud crack echoed through the room, followed by a low rumble. The walls began to shift. Marcus immediately dropped into a crouch, instinctively ready for whatever was coming. He could hear the low, guttural growls of the creatures approaching from all sides. He knew he had no time to waste. The labyrinth was shifting, closing in on him. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. The ceiling began to lower, and Marcus realized the room was shrinking. The walls were moving inward, creating a trap. If he didn't act quickly, he'd be crushed. His pulse raced, but he didn't panic. He'd been in tight spots before. He sprinted toward the nearest glowing panel, using it as a reference point to guide his steps. But as he moved, the ground shifted beneath him. A panel on the floor slid open, and a spiny tentacle shot up, narrowly missing his leg. The creature was fast, its movements too quick for Marcus to react in time. But he wasn't about to let it catch him. With a leap, Marcus launched himself forward, avoiding the tentacle by inches. He didn't waste time looking back. He knew that if he hesitated for even a second, the creature would have him. His heart raced as he sprinted toward the next glowing panel, the walls closing in behind him. The floor beneath him shook again, but this time, Marcus was prepared. As he reached the next panel, the ground beneath him cracked open, revealing a massive pit. He jumped just in time, his hands grabbing the edge of the platform as he pulled himself up. His arms burned with the effort, but he didn't stop. Looking down into the pit, Marcus could see the creatures moving below him, circling like sharks. The dark shadows shifted, their eyes glowing, their claws snapping in the air. They were waiting for him to make a mistake, and he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. Marcus quickly scanned the room, searching for a way out. The ceiling continued to lower, and the walls were still moving in. He had only moments left before he'd be trapped, crushed under the weight of the maze. The glowing panels were now more frequent, but they were shifting and disappearing as fast as they appeared. Then he saw it, a narrow passageway, just big enough for him to squeeze through. It was located on the far side of the room, barely visible through the shifting shadows. Without hesitation, Marcus bolted toward it, dodging another tentacle that shot up from the ground. His heart pounded as he sprinted, his every muscle screaming for relief, but he refused to stop. He was so close. Just as the walls were about to close in around him, Marcus dove through the passage, his body sliding into the narrow gap. He heard the walls crash shut behind him, and for a moment, everything went quiet. He was in a new section of the maze, but he had no time to relax. The creatures were still out there, hunting him, and the maze was far from over. His mind raced as he took a deep breath. He was alive. That was all that mattered. But he knew this was only a brief reprieve. The aliens hadn't thrown everything at him yet. There would be more tests, more dangers. But Marcus was ready. He had faced impossible odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. As he continued deeper into the maze, he couldn't help but think about the aliens who had underestimated humanity. They thought they could break him. They thought they could crush his spirit with their traps and their creatures. But what they didn't understand was that humans didn't break. Not easily. Not ever. Marcus was proof of that. The next part of the test awaited him. Whatever it was, he would face it head-on. Because that's what humanity did. We never gave up. And the aliens would soon learn that the hardest thing to kill in the universe was a human's will to survive. The walls of the maze seemed endless now, each turn leading to more danger, more darkness. Marcus was growing tired, but his mind was sharp. His body was sore, bruised from the tests, but his resolve had never been stronger. He had survived the creatures, the traps, the shifting walls. But now he faced something different, something far more sinister. The passageway he had crawled through opened into a large open chamber. The air was thick with a strange, acrid smell, and the ground beneath his feet was slick, as if coated with some kind of strange, unknown substance. He could hear whispers in the dark, voices that weren't quite human, but they were close. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his instincts screamed at him to be careful. He moved cautiously, his eyes scanning the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. The chamber was massive, its size difficult to gauge in the darkness, but there was a faint blue glow coming from above. Marcus stepped forward, carefully placing each foot, trying to make as little noise as possible. The whispers grew louder, and Marcus realized they were coming from all directions. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corner of his vision. His heart leaped into his throat, but he didn't panic. He knew he had to stay calm. The whispers grew into guttural growls, and that's when he saw them. The creatures were emerging from the walls themselves, their sleek, black bodies blending into the darkness. They were humanoid in shape but covered in thick, armored plating. Their eyes glowed a deep red, and their teeth were sharp, jagged, like razors. They were closing in, surrounding him. Marcus could hear their low growls, the sounds of their footsteps on the slick floor. But he didn't run. He stood his ground, every muscle tense, his eyes never leaving the creatures. The walls were closing in on him again. And this time, there was no escape. He was trapped. The lead creature stepped forward, its eyes locking onto Marcus. Its mouth opened, and the guttural growl that escaped sent a chill down Marcus's spine. The alien spoke in a language Marcus couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was mocking him, taunting him. Marcus felt a surge of anger. They thought he was weak. They thought they could crush him with their numbers, their strength, their traps. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. He was human, and humans never gave up. Not ever. Without warning, the creature lunged at him, its claws outstretched. Marcus dodged, narrowly avoiding the deadly swipe. He couldn't rely on speed. His legs were growing slower with each passing minute, but there was something he could do. In one fluid motion, Marcus grabbed a piece of debris from the floor and swung it at the creature's head. The blow landed with a satisfying thud, and the creature stumbled back, disoriented. Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew he had only one chance. He attacked again, this time targeting the creature's neck. The force of his blow sent it crashing to the ground, its body twitching as it died. The others hesitated for a moment, clearly shocked by his sudden aggression. But they quickly regained their composure and charged. Marcus fought back with everything he had. His hands were slick with sweat, his muscles aching, but he refused to stop. He had been through worse. He had faced impossible odds before. He would not back down now. He ducked under a swipe from another creature, rolling to the side and kicking out with his foot. His boot connected with the creature's leg, sending it sprawling to the ground. Marcus didn't wait for it to get back up. He was already moving, his body instinctively reacting to the next threat. But the creatures were relentless. They came at him from all sides, their growls deafening. The chamber felt smaller with every passing second, the air thick with the stench of their presence. Marcus's breath came in ragged gasps, his body screaming for rest, but he kept fighting. He had no choice. The ground beneath him shook again, and this time, it wasn't the creatures. The walls were moving again, closing in tighter, and the floor beneath him began to shift. The whole room seemed to be alive, reacting to the conflict. The maze was testing him once more, but this time, it was different. This time, it was giving him no room to breathe. In the chaos, Marcus spotted something, a glimmer of light on the far wall. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was enough. It was the way out. He made a split-second decision. With one last surge of energy, he launched himself toward the light. The creatures were on his heels, but he didn't look back. His only focus was the light, the escape. He reached the wall and slammed his fist against it, activating a hidden panel. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway beyond. Marcus didn't wait for the creatures to catch up. He dove through the opening, barely squeezing through as the wall slammed shut behind him. The chamber fell silent. Marcus leaned against the cold wall, panting, his body shaking with exhaustion. But he was alive. He had survived again. He knew the aliens thought they could break him. But as he stood in the darkness, heart pounding, he realized that the real test was just beginning. The maze had only just started to show him what it could throw at him. And he was ready. Humans didn't break. They fought. And Marcus was about to show them exactly what humanity could do when pushed to the edge. Marcus took a moment to catch his breath. The silence around him was almost deafening after the chaos of the last few minutes. His heart was still pounding in his chest, and his body ached in ways he had never felt before. But he couldn't stop. Not now. He knew the creatures wouldn't give up so easily. They'd be after him again soon. He straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow, and glanced around the narrow passage. It was dark, the only light coming from faint glowing symbols etched into the walls. The air was cool and smelled of something metallic, a sharp, almost acidic scent that made Marcus's skin crawl. The passage seemed to stretch on for miles, twisting and turning like a snake, its walls made of smooth, cold stone. Despite his exhaustion, Marcus pushed forward. He needed to keep moving. The maze had changed again, and he had to stay one step ahead if he wanted to survive. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his mind kept wandering back to the creatures, to the feeling of being hunted. They were still out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had him. As he walked, he couldn't help but think about the gravity of the situation. He had been tested, pushed to the edge of his limits, and he had survived. But he wasn't alone. The rest of humanity was out there, waiting for him to find a way to get back to them, to lead them to victory. Marcus had to survive, not just for himself, but for them. The passage began to narrow, the walls closing in on him. He could hear his footsteps echoing in the stillness, and the sound seemed to get louder the deeper he went. But he didn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Then, just as he thought he had reached a dead end, a door slid open in front of him. The room beyond was massive, its ceiling so high it was impossible to see. The air was different here, charged with energy, and Marcus could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped inside cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. At first, he saw nothing but shadows, but then the room seemed to come alive. He saw movement, and in the distance, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was another one of the creatures, but this one was different. It was taller, its armor more intricate, more refined. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent red light. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary opponent. This was their leader. The creature stepped forward, its voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate in the very air. "You should have stayed in the maze, human. You have no idea what you're up against." Marcus stood his ground, clenching his fists. The creature's words didn't faze him. He had heard worse, and he had already proven he could survive their traps. But this was something new, something dangerous. He could feel it in his bones. The creature's eyes flickered with something akin to amusement. "You have fought well, human, but this is the end. The maze is only the beginning of your suffering." Marcus didn't back down. His training, his resolve. Everything he had learned up to this point had led him to this moment. He wasn't going to let this creature intimidate him. Humanity had always been underestimated. The aliens thought they could break him, but they didn't understand one simple thing. Humans didn't break. They adapted. Without warning, the creature lunged at him, its massive form moving with terrifying speed. Marcus barely had time to react, but he managed to duck under the creature's swipe and roll to the side. His heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, but he didn't give in to panic. He focused, his mind laser-sharp as he searched for an opening. The creature was fast, but it was predictable. It made a mistake. It underestimated him. Marcus lunged forward, using the momentum of the creature's attack against it. His fist connected with its side. And for a moment, the creature faltered, its breath coming in ragged gasps. Marcus didn't give it a chance to recover. He went in for another strike, this time aiming for the creature's chest. But the creature was quick. It countered with a powerful blow, sending Marcus flying backward, crashing into the ground. Pain shot through his body, and for a split second, he thought he might lose consciousness. But he couldn't afford to. He had to keep fighting. He had to survive. Groaning, Marcus pushed himself up, shaking off the dizziness. His vision was blurry, but he could still see the creature looming over him, its red eyes glowing with malice. This was it. It was make or break. Marcus knew he couldn't let this creature get the upper hand. With a surge of adrenaline, he jumped to his feet, his body moving instinctively. He reached for anything he could use as a weapon, his hands closing around a jagged piece of metal that had fallen from the walls. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The creature charged again, but this time, Marcus was ready. He sidestepped, dodging the creature's strike, and driving the makeshift weapon into the creature's exposed side. The creature let out a shrill scream, its body jerking as the metal dug into its flesh. It stumbled back, but Marcus didn't stop. He pressed the attack, his movements fluid, driven by a single purpose: survival. The creature was wounded, but it wasn't finished. It lunged at him once more, but this time, Marcus was ready. With a swift, well-placed strike, he hit the creature's throat, sending it crashing to the ground with a final, dying scream. Panting heavily, Marcus stood over the fallen creature. His body was battered and bruised, but he had won. He had taken down the leader of the aliens. The fight wasn't over, but this victory was a symbol, proof that humanity was capable of far more than the aliens had ever imagined. As the creature's body lay still, Marcus took a deep breath. This was only the beginning, but one thing was clear: humanity would not be broken. And as long as he was still standing, he would keep fighting. The room was eerily quiet as Marcus stood over the fallen creature. His chest heaved with exhaustion, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but there was a sense of triumph deep within him. The battle had been brutal, and he had given everything he had to survive. Now, with the leader of the alien force defeated, he knew that the tide of the war had shifted, but it wasn't over yet. From the shadows, a familiar voice echoed in his mind. It was the voice of his commanding officer, Captain Aldridge. "Marcus, are you still there?" He let out a shaky breath and answered, his voice low but steady. "I'm here, Captain. I've taken down their leader. The rest of them should be vulnerable now." There was a brief silence on the other end of the communication line, and then Aldridge's voice returned, tinged with disbelief and pride. "Incredible. I never doubted you for a second, Marcus. But don't get too comfortable. The war is far from over. You've only taken out their head. We'll need to plan our next move carefully." Marcus nodded, though he knew the captain couldn't see it. His fingers tightened around the weapon in his hand, the jagged piece of metal still clutched tightly. His mind was racing as he thought about what was next. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. But the victory he had just earned, the defeat of the alien leader, would send a powerful message. Humanity was not weak. They were not to be underestimated. "I'll hold this position," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "But we need to move fast. The aliens will regroup, and we can't let them recover." Captain Aldridge's voice was filled with determination. "You're right. We're mobilizing the fleet now. You've given us the opening we need. Now it's time to take back what's ours." As the conversation ended, Marcus glanced down at the creature's lifeless body. The once mighty leader was now just a heap of broken armor and twisted limbs. A grim satisfaction settled over him. He had done what no one else could, and he knew it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of humanity. They were all counting on him. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet trembled. A deep rumble vibrated through the walls of the chamber. Marcus's eyes widened. Something wasn't right. He glanced up at the ceiling, his senses alert. The vibration grew stronger, more intense. It was as if the entire structure was coming alive, shifting and groaning under the pressure. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway outside. A dozen, maybe more, armed aliens stormed into the room, their weapons aimed directly at Marcus. They were massive, towering figures, their eyes glowing with the same menacing red light as their fallen leader. But this time, there was no fear in Marcus. There was no hesitation. He had just defeated their leader, and now they would feel his wrath. He dropped the makeshift weapon and reached for the blaster holstered at his side. His hand closed around it with practiced ease. The aliens paused for a moment, their weapons raised, but Marcus didn't wait. He fired first. The blast hit the nearest alien square in the chest, sending it crashing to the ground. But the others were quick, returning fire with deadly precision. The room erupted into chaos as Marcus dove for cover behind a nearby pillar, narrowly avoiding a barrage of shots. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. This wasn't the first time he had been outnumbered, and it wouldn't be the last. He peeked around the corner of the pillar, his eyes scanning for any openings. The aliens were closing in, their movements synchronized, their weapons trained on his position. But Marcus had an advantage. He knew how to fight smarter, not harder. He waited for the perfect moment, then sprang into action. With a swift roll, he emerged from his cover, firing 2 shots in quick succession. One of the aliens dropped, but the others were faster, more coordinated. They fired back, grazing his arm and sending him staggering backward. Pain shot through his limb, but Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed forward. There was no room for weakness. Not now. He ducked behind another pillar, his breath coming in sharp bursts. The aliens were advancing, their weapons steadily closing in on him. He had to act fast. His mind raced as he looked around, calculating his next move. And then he saw it. A massive energy conduit ran along the far wall of the room. It was heavily guarded, but if he could take it out, it would destabilize the entire facility. The aliens would be forced to retreat, and he would have a chance to escape. Without thinking, Marcus sprinted toward the conduit, his gun blazing as he took down 2 more aliens in his path. The remaining creatures hesitated, momentarily unsure of his intentions. That was all the opening Marcus needed. He reached the conduit and planted a charge on its base. The countdown began, a loud beeping sound filling the room. He didn't wait around to see if it worked. He ran, weaving between the pillars, firing shots at any alien in his way. The explosion rocked the room just as Marcus reached the exit. The force of the blast knocked him off his feet, sending him tumbling through the doorway and into the dark corridor beyond. He didn't stop to recover. He couldn't. His mission wasn't over. It was just beginning. He picked himself up, gritted his teeth, and continued running. Behind him, the sounds of the aliens' retreat echoed through the corridors, but Marcus didn't slow down. This was his moment, and he wouldn't waste it. He had made his mark, and humanity was finally striking back. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had just won its first victory, and the aliens would learn one thing. They had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humans, and that would be their undoing.